Hey there, Silver Recaps here. Today we're diving into a hauntingly mysterious story filled with twists, suspense, and unforgettable moments. Let's jump right in. The movie begins introducing us to a boy named Bruno. Bruno is always sad because his parents passed away in a car accident. Now, he lives with his grandmother, who tries her best to keep him entertained. However, Bruno's life feels empty and filled with sadness. To cheer him up, his grandmother gives him a pet mouse and encourages him to take care of it. She even suggests naming the mouse Speedy Bruno. Despite her efforts, Bruno's sadness doesn't go away, and his life remains dull. One night, Bruno's grandmother starts feeling unwell. At the same time, something strange happens outside their house. Mysterious woman is shown standing outside, silently watching both Bruno and his grandmother. The next day, Bruno and his grandmother go to a grocery store to buy some essentials. While Bruno is busy looking around the store, the same woman who was watching them from outside the house appears in front of him. This time, she offers Bruno some candy, but Bruno notices something alarming. The woman has a snake wrapped around her hand. Seeing this, Bruno is terrified. In reality, this woman is a witch. Before she can harm Bruno, his grandmother calls out to him from across the store. Hearing her voice, the witch is startled and quickly leaves the store, disappearing before they can confront her. Bruno runs to his grandmother and says, "I need to tell you something." His grandmother, sensing urgency, replies, "Let's go home first, and then you can tell me everything." Once they reach home, Bruno explains what happened. He says, "At the grocery store, a lady came up to me. She had a snake wrapped around her hand, and she was offering me candy." Hearing this, his grandmother asks, "Did she have gloves on? And was there a gap on her head?" Bruno nods and says, "Yes, she looked exactly like that." His grandmother's expression turns serious as she says, "That woman was a witch." She then decides to share a story from her past with Bruno. She tells him, "When I was young, I had a best friend. One day, a woman, just like the one you saw, came up to her. She offered her candy, and my friend ate it. The moment she did, she transformed into a chicken. I tried to tell everyone what had happened, but nobody believed me. That day, I realized that witches are real, and they exist in this world." The narrative shifts back to the present, where Bruno's grandmother urgently tells him, "We need to leave this place immediately. That witch has seen you, and she won't stop chasing you until she turns you into something else." She adds, "There's a 5-star hotel not far from here. My cousin works there, and he can arrange a place for us to stay. I know witches usually target poor children, so if we go there, we'll be safer." Acting quickly, Bruno's grandmother takes him to the hotel. With the help of her cousin, they secure a comfortable room. For the first time in a while, Bruno feels a glimmer of relief. However, the calm doesn't last long. Not long after their arrival, a large group of witches checks into the same hotel. Among them is the head witch, who is accompanied by her cat. Despite the hotel's strict rules against pets, the head witch smugly brings her cat along without concern. The hotel manager notices and approaches her, saying, "Pets are not allowed in this hotel." But the head witch, radiating authority, pays him no attention and continues as if she owns the place. That night, heavy rain pours outside while Bruno and his grandmother are in their hotel room. Curious and uneasy, Bruno asks his grandmother, "How can we identify witches?" His grandmother explains, "Witches don't have hair on their heads, which is why they always wear caps to hide their baldness. They also wear gloves to cover their hands and shoes to disguise their feet. They do all this to ensure no one can recognize them." Hearing this, Bruno becomes frightened. Despite the unsettling information, his grandmother reassures him that there's no danger in the hotel and encourages him to step outside for some fresh air. Reluctantly, Bruno agrees and leaves the room. However, the head witch's cat, sharp-eyed and ever watchful, spots Bruno and starts to follow him. Unaware of the lurking danger, Bruno wanders around the hotel and eventually meets another boy his age named Henry. The two boys quickly become friends. Henry excitedly tells Bruno, "Today, someone gave me chocolate and they promised to give me even more later." Bruno listens, but something about Henry's story feels strange. The mystery deepens as the night unfolds. Bruno begins playing with his pet mouse in a large hall inside the hotel. As he looks around, he notices a window, but soon hears someone approaching. Startled, he quickly hides. Moments later, the group of witches enters the hall. Bruno, trying to stay out of sight, crawls underneath the stage. From there, he watches the witches closely. One by one, they remove their shoes, revealing their deformed feet. While they have toes, their feet lack any actual fingers. Next, they remove their gloves, showing hands with only 2 fingers. Finally, they take off their wigs, uncovering completely bald heads. Bruno realizes in horror that the witch's hair was fake all along. Terrified by what he's seeing, Bruno stays hidden and listens as the head witch begins to address the group. She loudly proclaims, "We hate children. They're filthy, stinking little creatures. Our sole mission is to rid the world of every single one of them." She continued, "I've created a formula that will help us achieve this. With it, we can transform any child into a mouse. As she speaks, the head witch begins to levitate, demonstrating her immense power. One of the witches asks her a skeptical question, seemingly doubting her plan. Furious, the head witch uses her magic to burn the questioning witch to ashes, silencing the room. She then reveals the formula, proudly showing it to her followers. "This is how we'll turn every child into a mouse," she declares. However, the head witch suddenly stops and sniffs the air. "I smell the stench of a human child," she says, her voice cold and piercing. Suspicious, she moves closer to the stage where Bruno is hiding. Realizing someone might be underneath, she uses her strength to flip the entire stage. But Bruno, anticipating the danger, escapes just in time and runs for his life. Suddenly, there's a knock at the door. It's Henry. The chocolate Henry had received earlier was in fact given to him by the head witch. Henry steps into the room, unaware of the witches waiting inside. Before he realizes it, he's transformed into a mouse right before their eyes. The witches gleefully try to crush Henry under their feet, but at that moment, Bruno's pet mouse, Daisy, rushes in. Daisy quickly pulls Henry, now a mouse, toward the window Bruno had noticed earlier. The two mice escape through the small opening. The head witch, furious, follows them to the window and notices Bruno hiding nearby. She grabs him and pulls him out of his hiding spot. Holding Bruno firmly, she takes the formula and pours 3 drops into his ear. Bruno instantly transforms into a mouse, just like Henry. Now, as mice, Bruno, Henry, and Daisy scramble to escape. They manage to squeeze back into the window, but the head witch uses her unnaturally long arms to reach inside after them. Just as her hands get dangerously close, they strike a spinning fan inside the vent. The sharp blades force her to pull her hands back in pain. Bruno, now a mouse, realizes their only hope lies in his grandmother, the one person who knows how to deal with witches. Along with Henry and Daisy, he races back to his grandmother's room. Together, the 3 mice squeak and make loud noises, trying to get her attention. Bruno's grandmother, startled by the commotion, quickly understands that one of the mice is her grandson. She leans closer, realizing the truth. Her beloved Bruno has been turned into a mouse. Bruno and his 2 companions explain to his grandmother how the witches have created a formula to turn all the children in the world into mice and eliminate them. His grandmother says, "I can fix this, but I need the same formula they used to turn you into a mouse." She discovers that the witch's room is directly below there. Using a woolen thread, she carefully lowers Bruno into the witch's room. Bruno enters the head witch's room and finds that she isn't there at the moment. He quickly finds the formula bottle and grabs it. However, just as he does, the head witch comes back into the room. Before she can catch him, Bruno climbs back onto the woolen thread, holding the formula bottle tightly. His grandmother begins pulling him up. The head witch notices the thread and grabs it. Looking up, she says, "I think I've seen you before." She continues, "Ah, you're the one I met years ago. When you were a child, I turned your friend into a chicken." Before she can act further, the hotel manager enters the room. Distracted, the head witch lets go of the thread. Bruno's grandmother pulls him and the formula bottle safely back into their room. The manager asks the head witch, "What food would you like today?" The head witch responds, "Prepare soup for everyone, but make sure you don't add any garlic." It's revealed that witches are allergic to garlic and never consume it. Meanwhile, Bruno's grandmother is shown using her extensive knowledge of medicine. She carefully extracts liquid from the formula bottle and attempts to create an antidote to turn Bruno and his companions back into humans. Despite her repeated efforts, she fails and becomes disheartened. Bruno tries to comfort her, saying, "It's okay. Even if we can't become human again, we can save the other children. To do that, we need to make the witches drink the same formula that turned us into mice. That way, they'll all transform into mice too." Determined to carry out the plan, Bruno, along with his companions Henry and Daisy, sneaks into the kitchen where the witch's soup is being prepared. After facing many challenges, they manage to pour the formula into the soup, ensuring that all the witches will drink it. That night, Bruno's grandmother also arrives at the dining hall where all the witches are preparing to drink the soup. The hotel manager approaches Bruno's grandmother and says, "We've received a complaint that you have a mouse." Hearing this, Bruno's grandmother gets angry and replies, "Your staff set mouse traps in my room. That means there are mice in your hotel, which is why you have traps. I'll make sure everyone knows about this." The hotel manager, realizing her frustration, quickly apologizes, saying, "Please forgive us." Bruno's grandmother sits down, keeping an eye on the witches. Meanwhile, the head witch is shown about to drink her soup. Suddenly, she notices Bruno's grandmother and recognizes her. She remembers seeing her years ago, back when she turned Bruno's grandmother's friend into a chicken. Recognizing the threat, the head witch moves toward Bruno's grandmother, intending to harm her. However, by the time the head witch reaches her, all the other witches have already finished drinking the soup. One by one, they start transforming into mice. Chaos erupts in the dining hall as witches turned mice scatter everywhere, causing panic. Taking advantage of the commotion, Bruno sneaks into the head witch's purse and steals her room key. Bruno's grandmother then gathers Bruno, Henry, and Daisy, and they head to the head witch's room to execute their plan. But the head witch returns to her room and finds Bruno's grandmother standing right in front of her. The head witch stretches her hands toward her, and they begin to grow unnaturally long. Bruno sees this and quickly notices the mouse traps scattered around the room. With the help of his companions, Henry and Daisy, he manages to attach one of the mouse traps to the head witch's toe. The trap snaps shut, causing the head witch immense pain. She screams loudly, opening her mouth wide. Taking advantage of the moment, Bruno pours the entire bottle of the formula into her mouth. The formula flows straight into her stomach. Within moments, the head witch begins to transform into a giant mouse. Furious, she starts chasing Bruno and his companions. However, Bruno's grandmother acts quickly. She traps the head witch inside a large jar and tightly seals it. To make matters worse for the head witch, her cat, who had always disliked her, is set loose in the room. The cat immediately begins chasing the head witch turned mouse, ensuring her end. Bruno's grandmother takes Bruno, Henry, and Daisy out of the room and safely leaves the hotel. She then goes to Henry's parents to explain what happened, telling them how witches turned their son into a mouse. Unfortunately, Henry's parents refuse to believe her. Henry, now a mouse, says to them, "It's okay, I'll stay with Bruno's grandmother from now on." With that, Bruno's grandmother takes all three mice, Bruno, Henry, and Daisy, back to her home. At home, Bruno asks his grandmother, "How long does a mouse live?" She replies, 3 years. Bruno smiles and says, "Then let's make these 3 years the best of our lives." With that, Bruno, his companions, and his grandmother begin to enjoy their new life together. As a surprise, Bruno's grandmother had also taken a lot of money from the head witch's room. With this newfound wealth, they now travel the world and live happily. And with that, this story comes to an end. We hope you enjoyed this journey.